Thank you. So I do politics for a living, speak 5 days a week about politics, and so I appreciate being asked to come out here and not talk politics today. I'm also in seminary. One of the diversions I decided I needed in life after talking politics so long was to actually spend more time studying the Lord than studying the daily headlines. And this morning, I want to talk to you about one of the lessons that I've learned in these past few years. And I want to dwell on a verse in the Bible, the very first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I want to suggest to you in this day and age, that's probably the most countercultural statement that you can make in polite society. In fact, when Moses wrote it, it was also the most countercultural thing he could say. He lived as an Egyptian prince. He knew the Egyptian story of creation, multiple gods. In fact, every other religion on the planet at the time had multiple gods. And here comes Moses and says, there's only one God. He actually has a name. He's the God of Israel. And he created the heavens and the earth, not a plethora of gods. He even says that God put the sun and the moon in the sky and made all the stars. They weren't gods. That was a novel idea at the time. It's as novel as the idea today that nothing created everything. That's the prevailing view today. Let's look at some of the implications of in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It does explain why is there something and not nothing. We live in an age where the prevailing voices in the media would tell us that nothing created everything, that there was nothing and then there was a singularity and then there was a massive explosion of energy and matter and space and time. And where did it come from? Don't ask. For those who try to explain it, well, there was a universe and it collapsed and then this one came and then this one will collapse and that one will come. It's turtles all the way down. They have no answer for it. And yet this is the prevailing idea that even our public policy is shaped on, that nothing created everything, that one day we will die, the worms will consume us, and everyone will eventually forget us. You shape public policy a lot differently when you realize there's a creator to whom you'll be held accountable to. If God created the heavens and the earth, it also puts us in our proper place. We are creation. We're not a creator. We are part of creation. We are a significant part of creation, but we're not the creator. We don't get to pick and choose male and female. God's already done that. We also can get a sense of beauty and aesthetic. The universe itself is a beautiful place, and God himself in the creation story of Genesis 1, the plants were good, the animals were good, the separation of the waters from the heavens and the earth was good. The day was good and the night was good, but we were very good. Our creation was very good. God has a scale for aesthetic and beauty. We can too. A friend of mine actually wrote a piece one time, a pretty good piece for his college thesis, that the further away art in society has gotten from picturing the divine, we've become less and less art and more crazy. We've reached the day where you can hang a toilet on the wall and suddenly it's $1 million work of art. When we connect the aesthetic to God, we get a real sense, an objective sense of what beautiful is. And if God created the heavens and the earth, we get a sense of our relations. We're relational beings. He made male and female. We don't get to make male and female. God made male and female. He made us to relate to one another. He made marriage. If God created the heavens and the earth, we don't get to change marriage. God created it. But we also know that we're relational, and when we go into the town square as a political activist, we need to remember that God created us, and we have a relation to people, even those we oppose. They may be angry and fierce. They may want to silence you, but you can't turn them out and treat the world as the world treats us, because God created us. If we believe something created everything, then we have to put ourselves with each other within a proper role, a proper frame, a proper idea of how we conduct ourselves in the public square. They may not want us to go into the public square, but we shouldn't give them excuse to keep us from there. We should behave as God intended us to behave and to relate with one another. We also get from creation a sense of ethic and value. There were some things that were good and some things that were very good. We see this in the way that, well, if nothing created everything, survival of the fittest makes sense. If nothing created everything, why isn't the murderer put on a throne instead of being put in jail? He's not, because there's a sense of ethic. Where did that ethic come from? Tim Keller, in his book, The Reason for God, cited Arthur Leff, who said, when would it be impermissible to make the formal intellectual equivalent of what is known in bar rooms and schoolyards as the grand says who? In the absence of God, each ethical and legal system will be differentiated by the answer it chooses to give to the one key question: who among us ought to be able to declare law that ought to be obeyed? Stated frankly, the question is so intellectually unsettling that one would expect to find a noticeable number of legal and ethical thinkers trying not to come to grips with it. Either God exists or he does not. But if he does not, nothing and no one can take his place. God gives us our sense of ethic. It's not survival of the fittest. We're coming upon July 4th. If you read the Declaration of Independence, you know that the founders believed that the purpose of government was to protect previously existing rights, rights given by the Creator. We live in a day and age where those who see the world differently than us, those who believe nothing created everything, believes that we created the state and the state gives us our rights. The collective gives us our rights. That those rights can change as the mind of the collective changes. If you believe that God created the heavens and the earth, you cannot believe that. God gave us our rights. If God created the heavens and the earth, we also need to know that we can get an idea of who God is. Paul, writing in Romans 1, says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so they're without excuse." What do we get as a sense of God? How do we know God? First, we know he's a creator. He can do things we cannot do. We can believe in miracles because we can believe in God. We know that God has a sense of beauty and aesthetic. We know that he has a sense of ethic. We see this reflected in nature. Again, survival of the fittest works in a world where nothing creates everything, but where God creates everything, it fails. The strongest lay down their lives for others. We also know that God is relational, just as he made us relational. God is relational. He wants us to know him. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We've seen his glory. Glory is the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. If you know Jesus, you know God. If you know the gospel message, you can get a sense of who God is. God is not the dispassionate creator of all things who steps back and lets it go off on its own. He's an active, intervening God. He's a God who cares for you, a God who would lay down his life for you. And he wants a relationship with you. Now, how does this apply to you as activists here today? Well, we're to model ourselves after Christ. Christ believed in God. If you believe that God is the creator of heaven and earth, you have obligations to steward that earth, to leave it better than you found it. You have obligations in relation to yourself and the world, your relationship to the animal kingdom, your relationship even to plants, and your relationship to each other. We have an obligation when we go into the public square to share our beliefs, to model our beliefs. We have an obligation to answer the cry and the voice in the back of the head, "Why am I here?" when the world says, "You came from nothing and will return to nothing." We have the truth. And we shouldn't be afraid to share that truth in the public square. The world won't like it. The world hates the things of God. How can completely opposite groups from each other, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance and the Muslim Coalition in America, how can they collude together against Christians and people of faith, even though their ideas are antithetical to each other? Well, the things of the world hate the things of God. They're both of the world. They can ally with each other against the things of God, sort it out between themselves afterwards. But that doesn't give us the right to behave like they behave. It doesn't give us the right to be shrill and cold. We're to have a relationship with each other. We are to have a relationship, even in the town square, telling the gospel message. Christ said to go, make disciples of the world, to witness, to preach, and to baptize. It's not an optional thing for us. We have to go into the public square. We have to go where others choose not to go because God told us to. You're vastly more likely to find a person of faith rushing off to Africa to deal with the Ebola crisis than one who's not of faith because they're not called as we're called. I believe in the coming age, it's going to become harder for people of faith. I have a seminary professor who once said, if you've never been persecuted, you might need to rethink your salvation. It's coming, and that doesn't mean we should run and hide. The world is opposed to us if you're a person of faith. But you can't be opposed to the world so that you turn your back on others who might be saved. God created the heavens and the earth, and he did. We didn't. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. And if you believe in God, don't be afraid. Thank you.